Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good break. This is a very exciting session with a professional and individual that I've admired for a long period of time. Shiv Kumar is the Group Executive President at Aditya Birla Group and heads corporate strategy and business development. Prior to joining the Aditya Birla Group, Shiv led organizations such as Pepsi and Nokia and has worked with 500 brands globally in his career and seen many business transformations. Shiv just shared with me that actually one of the things that people don't know about him is his fear of flying. And he's done all the research to overcome that fear. And you well know that given the portfolio Shiv leads, he's probably taking multiple flights during a week. I welcome Shiv to the Learning Health Index Summit, and I request him formally to unveil the LHI 2021 report and share his insights with us.
Thanks a lot, Nisha. You've been a friend for many years, and it's always a pleasure to do this for you. I don't know about all of you on the call, but over the last 15 months, I've learned a lot. Okay, and I think that's the right platform to start in terms of the Learning Health Index. So, Kashish, are you putting on my slide, please? Yeah. So as I mentioned, I don't know about each and every one of you on the call, but I've learned a hell of a lot in the last 15 months, ever since the pandemic started. I was supposed to fly out to Michigan and to Atlanta on March 8th of last year, and I canceled it on the last day. And I said, look, no, I'm not so sure about this COVID thing. I thought it'll go away in 3-4 months. But over the last 15 months, we've completely changed the way we work. I have changed the way in terms of my routine, in terms of my food, my terms of my gym habits, in terms of my learning, and in terms of conducting meetings with my team. And I will share a lot of that as we go through today. Okay, next slide, please. So I start by asking ourselves, this is about Learning Health Index. So I start by asking myself, what type of a worker do we have today? What type of an employee do we have today in the workplace? And I go back to Peter Drucker, one of my gurus. Peter Drucker coined the expression the knowledge worker in 1959, believe it or not. Okay, that's virtually 60 years ago, 62 years ago. And what is a knowledge worker, the way Drucker defined it? A knowledge worker does a thinking job and keeps learning in order to do a better job. Now, Drucker defined this, remember, at the height of the Industrial Revolution and everybody doing more with machines and doing much more with productivity. And he said this much before the advent of IT and telecom and each of that. So in that sense, he was very prescient. And the key thing here is keeps learning. That's the important part. Next slide, please. Then after Drucker in 1959 came Kaizen in 1986. It was an American who went to, Deming, who went to Japan, and he taught the auto industry how to improve quality. What did we learn from the Kaizen way of working? We learned how to reduce waste as a team. We learned how to simplify work processes. We learned how to improve safety record. We learned how to improve customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction. We learned how to work in teams. We learned to be autonomous. We learned to put the issue on the table. Self-organized groups put the issues on the table and said, this is what we've learned. This is what we can do better. But most important of all, I think the Kaizen system taught people how to document learning. Document the problem, document the answer, and document what happened after that. Sometimes we recognize that, Kaizen as a way can only happen if you're properly trained. Otherwise, it does not happen. So this, I think, was the first real big initiative in terms of collective learning, where teams learned on their own, and then teams transformed that learning into benefits for the organization. Next slide, please. Then a lot of HR managers, etc., got together and said, what is the process of learning? What is the logic of learning? And then the 70-20-10 model, which a lot of people use even today, 26 years later, was around 70% of the time you learned on the job through challenging assignments. 20% of the time you went through developmental relationships. It can be a coach, it can be a mentor, it can be a good boss, and things like that. And 10% of the time you learn through courses and training. A lot of people do say that after people attend a course, they forget most of it in after 72 hours. But this was the 70-20-10 model of learning, which was then used by a number of HR people in terms of driving learning. Now we are talking of a learning health index, and we are talking of teams as a unit of learning compared to the individual as a unit of learning. And that's what I'm going to contrast right now. Next slide, please. So the learning health index says that learning is absolutely crucial. Now let's look at individual learning and team learning. And I will start by defining the whole concept of a team and how teams work, what are good teams and what are not so good teams. Next slide, please. Aristotle said many years ago that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And Google picked this particular quote and picked this particular philosopher to start a project on team management. Next slide, please. So Google launched a project called the Aristotle Project. In this, they wanted to study what makes effective teams, what do they display, and what are variables which contribute to effective teams, and what are variables which do not contribute to effective teams. So what Google found through Project Aristotle was there are 5 key successes in terms of delivering a great team. Number 1 is psychological safety. Does the team feel safe in its environment? Do people who are working together, do they feel safe with each other? Or are they worried about somebody backstabbing them? Number 1. Number 2, the dependability amongst team members. That I know that I can step in for you if you are short of something. Somebody else will step in for me if I'm short of something. So each of us will give and take something or the other in order to make each of us better. Third, structure and clarity in the team. Fourth, the meaning of work they do. Is the work they're doing meaningful, and is the work contributing value to the organization or to the purpose or to the institution where you're working? And finally, the impact of work. Is the work that we are doing really impactful? These are the 5 things which define good teams. And I think it's extremely important to focus on this as we think of the concept of a learning health index. Okay. Next slide, please. What Google also researched was what are variables which have absolutely no contribution to the team. Absolutely no contribution. And it's very important for people on this call, whether you're from EdCast, whether you're from the client organization, or whether you're from NHRD, to recognize this. Zero correlation between these 7 variables and teams and the way they work. Number 1, the co-location of team members. For long, we felt that if people sat together in one location, they're possibly better off and they will be a better team. That's not true at all. And I think the COVID pandemic has taught all of us that it's not true. I think all of us have figured out how to work as a team when we've been dispersed across the world. Number 1, teams which are consensus driven. That is also not true. I think there are many times teams have to challenge the conventional wisdom. Teams have to disagree and don't necessarily have to have consensus. Third, extroverted teams. There is this logic that if a team is extroverted, it will be a good team. That's not true. Fourth, teams matter in individual performance situations. That might be true for a cricket team, but it's not true in a football team. It's not true in most other teams. Next, seniority. Does seniority play a role in pulling the team together? The answer is no. Is the tenure of people in the team? People have been there for 5 years, people have been there for 7 years. Is that true? Not true at all. For example, in one of the teams I lead, which is the strategy team, I inherited a team in 2018, 3.5 years ago. Today, almost everybody has changed except one person. We are on the second round of people. And in the second round of people, 2-3 people have moved on. And we're still getting better as a team. So tenure has absolutely no correlation. And finally, team size. One of the things in the pandemic we found is that team size, smaller team sizes of 20-25 have worked better than larger team sizes on web calls. This is what is the new research which has come. But very clearly, team size has no correlation to team performance. Okay, so this is what we have learned from Project Aristotle, from Google, in terms of both what's good and what's bad. Now, the definition of a team itself is a challenge. What is a team? In most times, we've said somebody who works in a function is a team. Somebody who works in geography is a team. Somebody who works in office is a team. Next slide, please. In the 1960s, the aerospace industry gave us the matrix way of working. And today, most organizations, whether they're global multinationals or Indian multinationals or Indian organizations, most organizations are matrixed. They have a matrix way of working, which means people report to different lines of functions in order to do the same job. So suddenly, the definition of a team is very, very different from what we were used to in the past. So as more companies have accepted the matrix way of working, now we need to start thinking about what is common to people who work on this team, irrespective of which function they're really working in. Next slide, please. So as a result of matrix way of working, as a result of technology and its developments, and as a result of globalization and regionalization, today we have far more collaboration and communication tools today at work than ever before. The time spent in collaborating on work activities has gone up by 50%. In the 1990s, most companies adopted email. Email was the first truly collaborative technology tool. Today, there are so many. And today, when I'm speaking with all of you right now, this is possibly the ultimate collaborative tool, which is to have a webcast. WhatsApp is a wonderful collaborative tool. Almost every company I know and every function I know, the sales team has a WhatsApp group, the marketing team has a WhatsApp group, the finance team has a WhatsApp group, the strategy team has a WhatsApp group, and everybody is collaborating knowledge, learning, information on these WhatsApp groups. Okay, so today, in a matrix way of working, the definition of a team is a challenge. We have more collaboration and communication at work than ever before, thanks to technology, thanks to matrix structure of organizations, and thanks to globalization and regionalization. Today, information, the ability to learn, the ability to transmit knowledge, go back to the first slide which I used on Drucker, the ability to learn and keep learning is important. And that has become absolutely crucial. Next slide, please. Now, I have two slides on the Learning Health Index. I'm really glad that EDCAS and NHRDN have done this study. So, which are industries in India which have a Learning Health Index of more than 70, and which are industries where the Learning Health Index is less than 65? There are about 124 companies. This is a self-filled questionnaire. It's self-rated. It's not checked by anybody, etc. It's your own rating if you participated in this. In that sense, it's a good one because you're judging yourself on what you think is the Learning Health Index in your company. The industries where the Learning Health Index has been greater than 70 have been the travel industry, have been the conglomerates, and it has been the telecom industry. I can clearly understand telecom because telecom is a fast changing game. What you did last week is absolutely useless in telecom. What you do next week is more important. There was a time in Nokia when we never measured our sales in terms of sales versus last year. We measured our sales in terms of sales versus last month. That's how fast it changes. If in the mobile phone industry, you do not get 40% of your sales with new products launched in that year, your history, you'll have a terrible year. So the Learning Health Index in these industries, which is travel, conglomerates, and telecom, very high, more than 70%, which is very good. Surprisingly, I found that the Learning Health Index of less than 65 in IT services, in retail and FMCG, in durables, and in education. I find the last three surprising, which is retail, FMCG, durables, and education. I find it surprising because all these industries have one focus, which is the consumer. And if you look at the last 1 year, I submit to you that the consumer has changed faster than marketeers or companies or CEOs. The consumer has adapted and adopted to digital much faster than any of us. So I think the retail FMCG boys, the durable boys, and the education boys must forget the not invented here, must forget that I know it all. I think they are being led by the consumer, by the nose. They must change dramatically if the Learning Health Index in their organizations has to go up. And that's the only way they're going to win in the future. Next slide, please. Kashish, next slide. Slides have gone off, Kashish. Kashish, what's happened to the slide? Hello, Nishchay, any
Shiv, there may be a tech issue at
glitch? Yeah,
uh,
somebody else has it. They told me that there's another person. Binjit said that Avinash or somebody is the backup
yes.
on
Avinash, can
backup
you
on the
project
backup.
the slide, please? Avinash?
So just give me a minute. I'll open this.
Just open at the LHI survey 2021 by industry. That's where I was. Sorry for the glitch, guys. My apologies.
You can use this time to actually come up and script your questions. It's a good point to reflect on what has been shared by Shiv and come and think of your questions that you may want to ask him.
Has Kashi just dropped out in terms of? I think the network in our house must have gone off. Yeah. Go back. Go back one slide. Yeah, this is where I was. Yeah, please go on to full screen, please. Yeah. So this was the LHI survey of last year. Industries which are more than 70, which are less than 65. My submission to you, industries which are less than 65, you need to step up your learning as teams in order to succeed in a dramatically different world after 2021. Next slide, please. So when we asked people for attributes in the survey, what did they find as strong attributes? I think learning strategy in most organizations is good. That's what this survey throws up. However, what is weak or perceived as weak is tools and technology and the impact and measurement. Now, this sounds familiar to me, given one of the jobs I do, which is we always talk of strategy. So the learning strategy is fine, but our execution seems to be weak, which is tools and technology, and the impact or the measurement of that seems to be weak. So I think this is something that all the leaders on the call should be aware of and what you want to do. It is not good enough to put out a learning strategy out there. I think what's absolutely critical is to give your employees and your colleagues the necessary tools, and more important, to measure it to say what is the impact of this learning and what we are doing. Okay. Next slide, please. So I asked myself when I looked at this survey and I realized that we need to work or learn effectively in teams. When do teams learn together? Let me give you a few instances when teams learn together. Number one, when there is a shared goal. When everybody is clear that this is the shared goal, I think they learn together. Number two, when learning objectives are clear. Why are we learning? This is the reason we are learning. Next, when learning is linked to a very specific outcome. I think that's also very important. Most times when we start a project, we invite somebody else to come and talk to us, and then we learn together as a team, which is good. When there's new foundation knowledge, for example, in almost every company today, people are asking, how do I digitize? What is Bitcoins? A lot of people are asking simple questions like that. So I think there are foundational courses in terms of what is blockchain, what is artificial intelligence, what is machine learning, what is Bitcoins, what is cryptocurrency. When the foundation knowledge is very low and all of us need that foundation knowledge, then we tend to learn together. When there's a crisis, we learn together. If you remember the Apollo 13 crisis, Gene Kranz brought everybody together and said, we have a problem, and I define success as bringing back the vehicle back to Earth with all three astronauts safe. He said, that's how I define success. So when we are in a crisis, we learn together. And I think in COVID, all of us have learned together as a team. We've learned how to work on the webinar. We've learned how to communicate with each other. We've learned how to close work, etc. And most people have been more productive in this time. And finally, when everybody is a novice. When everybody is a novice, we're very happy to get an expert from outside and say, hey, you know what? Can you teach us something? We don't know this. Next slide, please. What are the watchouts in team learning? When don't teams learn well? I think there are different levels of capabilities in a team, then the team doesn't learn well. So when the capabilities in a team are asymmetrical, that team doesn't learn. Second is when there are different functional loyalties or silos, then the team does not learn. Because then each person comes at it as, look, I'm from supply chain, this is what I want to do. I'm from sales, this is what I want to do. I'm from finance, this is what I want to do. So then team quickly breaks away, it becomes siloed in nature, and nobody is there to integrate it. So whenever you have team learning, it's very important for you to ensure that you have good leadership which can integrate that learning. Next slide, please. So learning is an individual skill. All of us know that, absolutely no doubt on that. However, learning for a team is a discipline. And let me give you some examples. In COVID, in one of the businesses I run, the textiles business, we started doing our daily calls in the afternoon at 1 o'clock from across the world. In the afternoon at 1 o'clock, we'd get all the CEOs on the call to say what is happening in the market and how are we doing. Every day we did that till December. After that, we moved to a weekly call. So in a sense, we're managing the business, in combined learning terms on a daily 24-hour basis. With the strategy team, I asked them to have a call every evening at 5 o'clock to learn, okay, what's happening, what can we do different, what should our businesses watch out for, etc. So the whole team was learning every evening at 5 o'clock. So somebody or the other was bringing a new topic to the table and say, hey, this is what I want us to talk about today. I think this is the impact it will have on our business, okay? I think in webinars, most companies opened up their companies to external stakeholders, and many CEOs and many people out there went and spoke in each of these webinars to impart knowledge cross company. I think the other thing we learned was vaccination. See how many of us have coordinated, in terms of the learning on vaccination, where to go, what to do about it, etc. And all of us have learned together. So I think businesses have learned together, health issues we've learned together, vaccination we've learned together. And if you look at families have learned together, okay, topics for their children or education through this pandemic. So learning is an individual skill, but is a team discipline. Next slide, please. And my last slide, I'll still, finish in 20 minutes, despite the glitch. Quite often we ask the question, why do companies succeed? And there's a lot of research. And one of the important points of that is right place, right time, luck, number of reasons why people say companies succeed at the right time. There's a lot of research on why companies don't succeed. While people don't agree on why companies succeed, most people agree on why companies don't succeed. And there are 3 reasons why companies don't succeed. Number 1, arrogant leadership. When leaders think that they know it all. And I go back to that LHI less than 65, some of them might be displaying that. Number 2, when you have a very strong culture. A strong culture is actually a weak thing because a strong culture does not force you to change. So Henry Ford did not fail because he had a weak culture. He had an extremely strong culture. And that's why he said you can have any car as long as it's black. What was the culture? To produce a car at the lowest possible cost structure. That was the culture. Everything was done around that. The reason he wanted black was because black paint was the fastest drying paint on the assembly line. A red paint or a blue paint took more time. And hence he said we'll only make black cars. Because it brought the cost down, it improved productivity. And the third reason why companies fail is the inability of the company to learn and unlearn. That's the reason. So in the launching of this Learning Health Index, okay, you can download this. It's a wonderful initiative from EdCast and NHRD. Please remember, learning and unlearning for every team is crucial. The shelf life of a concept today is less than 14 months. The shelf life of a company today is less than 20 years. In 1960, the average age of a company was 60. Today, it is anything between 13 to 18, depending on which data point you read. If you're not going to learn, unlearn, whether it's your business model, whether it's your people strategy, whether it's your customer strategy, you do not have a future. So learning and unlearning is absolutely critical. So one of the things I'm asked, and I'll close with this, I tend to read a lot of books. And a lot of people ask me, why do you read all these books, etc.? I read these books because it keeps me up to date. All I can tell you is knowledge might not help me succeed, but lack of knowledge is an absolute certainty to help me fail. So if you lack learning, you will almost certainly fail. If you learn, you'll be on the treadmill, you'll be in the game. So please keep learning. Please encourage your team to learn. So that's all I had to say, Nishchay and Edcast. Thank you very much. I think we are over by a minute or two thanks to the glitch, but I'm more than happy to pick up anything from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiv. That was absolutely wonderful. And Swami Chinmayanand said that we are born not to compete with each other, but to complete each other. And the notion of a team is really about honing skills that can combine and conquer and help raise standards of performance within an organization. Questions. So there's a question that I saw that came in, and that talks about, well, how do you actually rate self-rated surveys, the effectiveness of self-rated surveys vis-a-vis those of audit-based ones?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is a question I discussed with Nishchay also when we did this, when we looked at the survey. Here's what I would tell you. A self-rated survey, when you start, it's the baseline, right? You're given a baseline to yourself. Next year, you're giving the same baseline. So it's like an open book exam, right? You know what to do about it. So nobody else needs to come and show you the mirror. You have the mirror to yourself. There are other surveys where somebody else comes and audits it, etc. That's fine. But it's about self-awareness. If an organization is self-aware, just as individuals need to be self-aware, I think you'll be fine.
And just to add to that, I think equally so is the responsibility of a competent authority to be as objective in their assessment, such that you can see the mirror yourselves to begin with. So that authenticity and objectivity is very important as you engage in a survey.
I would say, yeah, I would add to that, Nishchay, what I have seen in self-surveys is, some people tend to overrate themselves, some people tend to underrate themselves. Both sets of biases creep in.
Correct.
Okay, so that's okay.
Law of averages, hopefully.
Yeah.
Any other questions or parting thoughts, Shiv, that you'd like to share? I don't see any further questions coming through. Any advice for the learning and development community?
I think, see, the thing about learning and development community is, I think you have lots of tools and lots of things. You have to work with the team to actually figure out where is the team good, what is its capability level, where is it very strong, where is its capability level weak. And if you look at today, I think communication is absolutely critical as a learning discipline. Okay, whether it is written communication, whether it is spoken and the word. I think we are falling behind on written communication. I think that's an area which I think we really need to think. The second place I think you need to ask yourself is, what skills or capabilities are needed in the team to truly make it agile? Agile is a big word. I think in order to do that, you need to progress work horizontally in an organization. The handovers have to be very, very good. And when is a successful handover, when is not a successful handover? So I think the learning in terms of the unit of work, how is it processed and how is it handed over, I think is another very important aspect. Because many times today's organizations are slow because things are falling in between those cracks between silos or departments of people. So till you truly do that, you'll not get a learning organization, you'll not get an agile organization.
Now, Shiv, there's an interesting question here. It says, what is the method to achieve collaborative excellence? Because
that's a very good question. I can give you two examples.
Have kind of fueled the hero worship culture through the PMS or performance management system, right?
Yeah, I can give you two ones. Both Nokia as well as PepsiCo. In both Nokia and PepsiCo, I started in my second year, I think. We had what we call the blue box. Out of 5 objectives everybody had, 2 were common. And those 2 common ones are the top line, the profitability, and the market share of the company. So everybody in the organization had it, whether he was in manufacturing, he was in sales, etc. And I remember many people would say, but I'm in manufacturing, I have nothing to do with sales. Sure, but you have to ensure that the product reaches on time so that somebody can sell it. So everybody was focused on the overall objectives. And every month, I used to put out my objectives or the company objectives and put it on a traffic light and send it to everybody. This came as a result of one of the what we call an initiative is called the CEO, Collaborate, Execute, Own. This is a program we started for the top 300 leaders. Shamik Basu, Pavitra Singh, Bhavya Mishra, Abhishek, these are the guys who are involved with it. It was a very successful program in developing future leaders, but this is how we forced functional collaboration.
Great. We are on the hour, Shiv. I can't thank you enough for sparing this time. Always listening to you is a joy. Your pragmatism, your ability with telling a story with simplicity, and for the audience to really go back with concrete takeaways and to-do items is really beneficial. Thanks once again, Shiv. And to the audience, we'll be back at 3:20 with Prime Time. See you then.
All the best, guys. Thank you.